Test 1 2. Test 1 2. Test 1 2. Test 1 2.
Oh, good. How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you? That's good. How's school going? Are you still on?
Still trying.
You almost done with that now?
Yeah, this is my last semester course for safer comps over the summer. Oh, my friend wanted your number for some reason. I didn't want to give it to you.
I had a block on this. She just started harassing me.
You start harassing me? For what? About what?
No idea. And like, I know like your friend there, so like I don't want to like. I sent it to I sent that about the England
Yeah. Excited to get to do a. Yeah, I'm worried about it. I already know. Yeah, sorry, I got my cords everywhere. Yeah. Yeah, actually.
Hi to everybody online. People are gathering now. I believe the program should start here in a bit. But if you have any trouble or have any technical questions, if you want to put it in the chat or anything I can do to help.
Well, I was saying, more city. That's what it's supposed to be.
Oh,
Yeah.
is that what you drank?
Yeah, we should share that stuff. We could have a federal or something.
I couldn't tell that, picture I've never done.
That's a better picture.
Yeah.
We could have a federal or something.
Oh, well, there you go.
What's that? This, he would always hand
I always
me
had a couple shots of that.
he would always hand me the bag.
I was laughing like that. She was laughing.
When I that's actually good. I drink that. Black cherry bourbon. It's so good. You know what else? You know what else is good? I do this in the summer. I'll get cherries, orange cherries.
Summertime drinks, hey.
Black cherry bourbon.
Who's that? Oh, nice. Yeah, that was great. Hey, Mike, how you doing?
I'm like, where is she? Where is she? No, you know what?
Especially for online recording, you might be having some issues. We don't want to fix on camera, Google Chrome, Brave, and Microsoft Edge, so you can use your iPhone as a webcam with your Privacy and security, and then site settings. Scroll down until you see camera. When you click camera, you'll see up here you have the choice of different cameras, but most likely your iPhone is not showing up. Even if it's the camera is working in other applications, to get it to appear, open another application where you can use your iPhone as a camera, QuickTime or FaceTime. Let's open FaceTime real quick so we can get the iPhone connected. Click up here in the video menu and then select your iPhone from the camera menu. Now you're going to have to restart Google Chrome to get it to appear. So you also need to restart your computer during this process. Let's go back to the three dots, go to settings, once again to privacy and security, site settings, scroll down to camera. And our iPhone should appear in the camera this way. Just click each iPhone to appear in that menu. You might want to try
Haven't even started on that. Yeah.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Youngstown Historical Center for Industry and Labor. I am John Liana, your curator, by abstention. Okay. Tonight, we honor one of our own. He was a unique individual who always put education, knowledge, and truth above all other components in his life, and had a particular affinity for this institution, what it represents, and for the people that worked at his side. Dr. Leary was born in Rochester, New York, the son of Daniel Leary, a research associate for the University of Rochester's biomedical facility. His mother was an RN and a homemaker. Throughout his life, Dr. Leary was surrounded by academia. He often related to me some of his childhood stories about growing up with such educated parents. He was always college-bound and entered John Fisher College, a private Catholic liberal arts institution in Rochester. It is currently ranked number 40 on the 2024 Best Regional Colleges list. His doctorate in history was obtained from Brown University. While he was at graduate school, he became curator for the Slater Mill Historic Site in Pawtucket, Rhode Island. Afterwards, he moved to Buffalo, New York, where his position was Director of Interpretation for the Buffalo and Erie County Historical Societies. During his tenure, he coordinated a survey of Buffalo industries, and together with his wife, Elizabeth Libby Schultz, wrote a history of Bethlehem Steel's Lackawanna plant and organized several exhibits entitled Made in Buffalo, which documented the area's industries. In 1988, the two of them launched a consulting firm, Industrial Research Associates, performing negotiations and research for government and private agencies, one of which was this museum. By 1999, he was hired as a history professor at YSU, where he taught architectural and fortuitously industrial history. At the museum, he would train students and workers, including this one, in the arts of public history and museum practices. Dr. Leary, I would never call him by his first name, and then only refer to it to others after receiving my own doctorates. I simply called him boss. He showed me how to build and write scripting for my first exhibit for my master's, entitled Blueprint for Success, a master's exhibit about the Bessemer converter. I have been working for a few years here, and before that was a student worker here, cataloging blueprints and documents for the archives. As I documented this material, I gradually became more interested in the processes they illustrated. I would then go to Dr. Leary, unfold the document on his desk, and ask for clarification, which were usually detailed explanations of the representations and plans for every little part about the subject matter contained on the drawing. His guidance served not only the functional educational purpose of how this would fit into a larger concept, say, of a blast furnace, but talking with him would increase my curiosity until gradually I was able to understand the entire structure from top to bottom. Believe me, it was top to bottom. These scenarios occurred many times more than I can remember throughout my 15-year career here. He got excited when this happened. It's as if he was thinking, imagining to himself, he finally understands. And I believe it was very fulfilling for him as well. I could tell by the smile on his face on opening night. As a student in his architectural history class, I remember walking through the neighborhood in which he lived. I knew it well, or so I thought, for I'd grown up only a block away. I knew many of the people, and the homes were nice middle-class city houses. I thought I knew much about this field trip, but in fact, I knew nothing. What I knew was superficial. It was not until Dr. Leary began to lecture as we walked that I truly began to understand the concepts of design and spatial relationships regarding Youngstown's checkered labor past and the housing which it afforded its workers. And this was only the beginning. I realized this during the summer after my master's was complete, when the Friends of the Museum came across with a stipend at his request for me to stay and remain on the payroll as his research assistant. I was floored. From that point, Dr. Leary made me feel part of the museum and its mission. We worked together on several projects from then on. They began, as always, by helping other students achieve those parameters which he had so richly ingrained in me. And I was still learning, as I am now. My passion for learning knows no bounds, thanks to his impartation of knowledge and even more by his example. The finished product is much more than it seems. The finished product is important, but how one gets there is paramount. The limelight is nice, but deeper satisfaction can be achieved by the amount of work that's poured into the project's creation. Through these many years, I have created or participated in over 17 major projects here at the museum, an average of 1.3 per year. Each project included Dr. Leary's valuable input, information, and instruction, which he freely imparted in a rotating, ongoing, yes, seriously, ongoing basis. Okay. It is during these functions over the years that the term steel culture became more acceptable. It was anathema to him to begin with, but it became more acceptable to him as a proper term for promoting the function of this museum and the all-around preservation of what the idea of steel culture meant and still means to the Mahoning Valley area. We have entertained many field trips and tours together for visiting scholars who have an interest in the sights and sounds of the steel industry, which represented the former core of Youngstown's economy, the steel mills. I do not know how many miles we put on his vehicle, chauffeuring clients back and forth between those sites and the museum, or how many stops we made for photos of those sites or for lunch. A big van. He would give me the times and the dates of their arrivals, and through practice and fine-tuning, clients would be lectured in transport about the complete histories of these places and their importance to the communities which they adjoined, the working men and women who performed the jobs, and the impacts and demise of the shutdown. I would drive and listen intently. Still a student. Eventually, over the years, we had a well-planned, tailored tour for each individual group. Winter, spring, summer, or fall, it made no difference to us, as there was always some knowledge to impart in any given scenario or climate. Those days are a memory now. However, I have retained enough instruction, however cursory, for I could only parrot the knowledge. I could never achieve his level of experience. To continue the process in which he allowed me to participate, I am forever grateful. Dr. Leary was an esteemed published author. Many years ago, he gave me a book, that little green one right there, from his office shelf entitled The Popular Conception of Industrial History, published by the University Publishing Associates of Boston in the late 1980s. Citation: just before this museum was built. He turned to page 54 and told me to read the last paragraph. It contained 3 items, 3 themes, quotes, of mutually reinforcing value for reinterpreting industrial exhibits and devising new ones. These 3 major themes are: number 1, uneven development; number 2, the value of local studies; and 3, interrelationships between technology and the organization of work in specific industrial settings. For the first theme, uneven development, it can be explained as creating a refined context for interpreting artifacts associated with a variety of workplaces. For example, linking changes in the labor processes with those already in place, so they may then coexist with industries, within industries, or even within the same factory. Another example, the already established art of puddling produced wrought iron could and should coexist with the more modern ways of making iron and steel, such as the open hearth process. And for many years, they did exist side by side, one product as important to the industry as another. The term rabble was used in both processes as one of the last steps in production of the 2 unrelated products. The second point of industrial museums is the importance of case studies from a hodgepodge of data. Intensive investigations of processes prevent overgeneralizations from known conditions in the field. This lets exhibits recover the human dimension of industrial work. And the third bequest from contemporary scholarship to industrial history is for exhibits to highlight the effects of changes in the social organization by established shop floor routines. The art of puzzling became diminished over time as the social structure increased the demand for steel, and not just iron. It became relegated to decoration and cooking in pots and pans, pieces for your furnace. This phase deals with keeping exhibits relevant to the times in which they are displayed. That's important. Considering general social changes to customs, wages, and workloads. I have endeavored to include these valued points in all my creations for the museum. He also wrote for many other publications having to do with industry. Among them are articles on labor, the continuous caster, one of them's right here, from the iron and steel industry in the 20th century, and the Boot Cotton Mills Museum and American Textile Museum for Technology and Culture Quarterly for the Society for the History of Technology, both of which we have in our collections. The last project we were working on together is displayed in this PowerPoint I'm about to show you. We decided, as others did too, because I have to seek permission from everyone. It's part of my job. Okay, we decided on the idea of an outdoor tour of the architecture of this building. Research was done on the designer Michael Graves and on the Jaminet Company, which is a local constructor here in the Valley. At first, Dr. Leary was a little skeptical of the research that I had found and was not entirely until I showed him the sources, the actual sources for the project, that he finally acquiesced to the content, which had to be edited precisely to fit this project. He had never heard that this building was constructed to mirror the aspects of a working integrated steel mill. I presented him with 3 versions of the scripting and pictorials for this now short review of the many concepts which went into its design. His approval was finally forthcoming, and it meant much to me personally. This spring, we're going to add this to our tour of the building, provided the weather leaves us alone. This portion of our tour takes about 10 extra minutes and provides another dimension as to what we represent on the inside. One of these words, oh, yeah, it would help if I turn it on. Something I never learned, damn it. Here you go. This is on Michael Graves, and we lecture on this part about the designer. He was awarded the American Institute of Architects commendation for proposing this project, okay, for his design of the building, centered around the mills and industrial processes, commemorates a vanishing way of life, which is just 2 years after the shutdown of Republic Steel, the last holdout here. The building's elements represent forms of typical industrial landscapes, potent images, things like that from the 19th and 20th century. But more importantly, it's here. It's incorporated here. How? On the west wall, we have what we call the octagon staircase. And if you look at this structured spiral staircase, which I am also working on some material with some steel artists to turn it into a gallery of steel art and pictures. He designed the stairwell after a European design, columns circularly designed, 40-foot high ceilings. But if you look at it from here, it looks like the inside mirrors the inside of a blast furnace. This is where the start of iron is here. Without the blast furnace, there is no steel. The south wall on the outside with the smokestacks and the uneven brickwork is reminiscent of taking that molten steel and taking it to the open hearth. The other furnace, which the molten steel was added to different chemicals and made steel from iron in the open hearth. Okay. There's a lot of things in here about transport ladles and things like that that I go through with this tour, especially the William B. Pollock Company. The east wall, Graves' design, included these bay doors, which are supposed to be reminiscent. Picture the railroad tracks running now from the open hearth through those bay doors into what is a large cavernous space. We use it now for the second floor of the exhibit and for the workrooms downstairs in the basement. They are windowless, okay? Which is the way the type of the way that the mills were, the rolling mills and things like that. Okay, they were windowless buildings in which all the rest of the shaping and treating of steel went on until you finished a product. Rollers, stampers, presses, and cutters were all housed in these buildings. So if you went through those bay doors, which are now closed permanently, and went into the building, it would be reminiscent of this type of material. Okay. The north wall, that's right outside here. Graves was really big on community and representing something to the community that mirrored their wants and desires and life. If you look at the front of this building, you see the arch that goes across. All right, and the large piece on the top, the rotunda. And there are actually 3 bays of windows on either side of the front door. They mirror the building across the street at the cathedral. Sculptures. Okay. Flanked by steel sculptures on the east side by George Siegel's 2002 steelmakers. This used to be downtown until some of the local youth decided to deface all this stuff down there. And they brought it here and put it in our front yard. Okay. Where it would be safe from the destruction. Don't forget, when this stuff is happening, when he's making these things, okay, the demise of steel is still fresh. And there's a lot of things that needed to happen even to ensure a place like this. We didn't get a lot of business in the early days. Still hurt. Still hurts. Still hurts now. So he took a sample of the steel heat from the open hearth. That's what this pictures. What he did is he took instead of traditional techniques, he wrapped plaster bandages around these forms to create them. Okay. And that's what he used for his sculptural medium. On the other side, the Sentinels. These are Ray Rackoff's creations. He worked at the Youngstown Sheet and Tube, and he was a steel sculptor. sculptor. He did all of these things. I have many more of them downstairs, which I'm hoping will go out in the new art mill and the new art galleries. Okay. I have many more of them down there. He trained people to do this. It was part of his legacy before he passed on. But these sculptures here, what he was particularly interested in was not only iron and steel, but the one on the far left about the ravages of war. He hated it. And a lot of his sculptures have to do with the ravages of war, like legs with no body, artificial legs with not supporting anyone, or half a torso. He made these things to make a statement, working in the yards at the same time. That's it for the outdoor tour. If I were to take you on one now, it would probably take me 10 or 15 minutes if it was nice, really nice. And we go around the building and all these things would be pointed out. And then we bring you inside the door and start the tour here. I cried alone to myself at his demise. For the world will never know another like him. I understood him and his thought processes enough to ascertain what a truly unique and marvelous man he is. I speak in the present tense because everything he left me, as well as others, is here in this museum, forever ensconced in the annals of this microcosm and last bastion of knowledge and truth, which we proudly call the Youngstown Historical Center of Industry and Labor. We endeavor to do him justice. Lastly, if I may be so bold, after all these years and all the mileage, I may now publicly utter the phrase, "I miss you, Tom," and use his first name. Indulge me. Several times we were at the Federal, okay? If I could get the cap off, it'd be really great. Okay? If you have a glass in front of you, I toast you, Tom Leary. Just remember, in the winter, far beneath the bitter snow, lies the seed that with the sun's love, in spring becomes a rose. Here. That's not out here. And now, without any further ado, I would like to introduce to you Tom's counterpart and a scholar in her own right, Elizabeth Libby Schultz.
So I thank all of you for being here. There are a lot of people who are out in the hinterlands of all parts of America watching this on YouTube who couldn't be here. And I am deeply grateful for their presence. And we hope that at some point there will be actual person-to-person contact as well. I will reverse this slightly over the norm. This, as you imagine, and those of you who know what happened, it was quite a shock. There was no reason to think that he wasn't going to outlive me. And when I had to come back, because I was living and working in California, because when he got the job down here in 1999, it was pretty clear there wasn't much for me to do. And so I went back to where I had been a grad student and got work, and we did the commuter marriage, but we talked every Sunday and until we didn't. So when I had to come back here, this entire community, and that includes all of our friends who are far and wide with the Society for Industrial Archaeology and various museums, just threw open their hearts and made this very doable for me. There was just great kindness, and I want to thank my neighbors and thank all the people who took care of me, and the people who took care of our house when we finally got around to selling it, and all the people here who took care of his work. Tom, as you heard from John, grew up in Rochester, New York. He was a product of McQuaid Jesuit High School and St. John Fisher College. What he thought of those two institutions as a lapsed Catholic is probably better not discussed here, but he had some regard for what he learned. He absolutely liked that. But his limitations from that experience were summed up by him one time when he was trying to understand the particular technological process, is that his whole childhood was lots of Latin and Greek, no shop. And he missed the practical and was intrigued by it and wanted to be more knowledgeable in it. So when he went to grad school, I was at grad school at the same time. We hit the lottery as far as timing, because it was a period in American historiography that was extraordinarily interesting. We were no longer dealing with the big picture, the story of wars and kings and trade routes and so on. We were starting to look at the microsystems, and that sounds really dull, but what it really means is that you're looking at small instances in local areas of real people. And if you're lucky, as you're doing research, and he was very lucky, you can put names to those people. They're no longer the faceless laboring class. They're no longer the weavers. They're no longer the steelmen. They're no longer just a blob. They become human beings. And out of those micro investigations, you then build the larger story. It's very much the way detectives build cases, is out of evidence. And you build up the case, and you then come to a conclusion. You don't start with a conclusion and then just keep trying to reproduce it. So when we got together, we not only knew we had found each other intellectually when we got married and were unpacking books and found we had two of everything. We were reading the same things coast to coast. But when he started working at the Buffalo and Erie County Historical Society, I was teaching for Cornell University's Labor Studies program in Buffalo. So we always said that we had the quick and the dead. I had the quick, he had the dead. But when we were working with the union people and we were studying the various industries, and we began particularly working with Jet Lowe from the Historic American Engineering Record to document these things photographically, which, by the way, are all online. The stuff is available to anyone now. A lot of the way that we got admitted into various places was through my students who were part of the union. And we had some amazing contributions to make. The flip from that was, once we'd done those photographs, we took them to the workplaces and sat down, sometimes at a bar. You do it where it's comfortable. And asked people, tell us what's going on in this photograph. Tell us who's in this photograph. Give us an understanding of what gets done. So that the person and the process and the technology all go together. There's no longer just this bifurcation between technology and work, or between work as a broad category and the people who do it. So in 1992, or slightly before that, when we started interviewing the boss roller of the rail mill in Lackawanna, he told us amazing stories that had us understand not just what he did, because he was absolutely brilliant. And he could tell the temperature of a rail coming toward him within 10 degrees of what you could measure with optical parameters. He just was that skilled. And he knew how to put bends on these things so they would cool straight, so they would be usable. All that information was wrapped into a life history of a man who was interested in everything around him. And that included taking responsibility, because he was the boss roller, but he wasn't in charge of the whole of the rail mill. It was his concern to know what the people who worked the billet ends, who worked on tonnage, sent things through the rolls also on tonnage to get to the hot saws that cut the lengths of the rails and then sent them on to him. These end processes got in the way of how much tonnage they could put through, because they were obsolete. It's that combined and uneven development. You have high tech, you have low tech, all on the same floor. And you have conflict that can arise, and that required people to work cooperatively to figure out how that solution, because they weren't obviously going to go get something new on the hot sauce, because that costs money. Bethlehem wasn't interested in investing in new things. So they had to work it out themselves. And it's out of that appreciation for the people and what they knew and how they worked, that has been so part of his life, both in the textile industry, then when we were in Buffalo and then here, is that all of that is informed by a genuine curiosity in how do you do something and who does it. When we were still students in Rhode Island, where we first lived, we bought a book. It was our big hurrah. It was for sale. I don't even know how we found out about it, but it was a rare book. It was not that rare, as it turns out, but it was Naylor Tom's Diary, and it was by Thomas Hazard, a fairly well-known name in Rhode Island, and he was a nail maker. And it's his day-to-day diary for all of his adult life. And he would talk about, it was tedious, dull, turgid, but it built up a story and a picture of a human being. And of course, one of the things that affected both Tom and me is that he was just talking about it like, I made soup today, I did this, I did that, I got married, I got whatever. And we went, what? In the world of bridezillas, that was sort of an understatement. And he never mentioned it again until 40 some years later, he wrote, "My wife died today." And it was the most heartbreaking thing I have ever read, of a man who had lived a life of great love, but never talked about it. And at the end, he said, "I can't believe I will never, never, never see her again." And it just tore Tom up, because that was exactly what he was trying to convey to people, is to look at the fact that these are human beings. Look at the fact that everybody you're studying is of value. So when we both started teaching at one point for Fredonia State and taught oral history, public history. And the thing that we tried to say to people is, when you go to do an oral history with somebody, take something because you are asking something. You are taking part of their life for your edification and for you to write about. So quite a lot of zucchini bread got made. And we would take that, or we would take something that we thought was relevant to their interests. I do think in I think it was 90, was the SIA conference in Chicago. We got a chance to go down and tour the Chicago Heights steel that splits rails and then makes the posts that you see on stop or speed limit signs, those metal posts that are in everywhere in America. Those are made out of old railroad rails that they know how to re-roll. So we took an article from the 1901 Iron Age magazine down there thinking that they would like that, and then asked if it was possible for people from the SIA to come video the process, and the man said, heavens no, this is proprietary. And to our credit, we did not laugh that we had just given him an article that was 80 years old on the proprietary process, not a secret. So we had moments of, if not high hilarity, it was understanding that what is valuable to people isn't always the same. And we enjoyed our interactions with people. We enjoyed working with the union people. We enjoyed being able to bring all of this meticulous research. Tom's work process, I do not recommend this to anyone unless they absolutely want to do this. His work process for all of our lives together was to sit in front of a sporting event of some kind, didn't matter what it was. His only criterion for what he watched was it had to be a team from the deindustrialized area, with one exception. It could not be the Steelers because Martha and Donna would have killed her. So he would sit and watch the game, whatever it was, and take meticulous notes on whatever interested him at the moment. It was on some in a particular mechanical process, some labor event, somebody that he came across whose identity he wanted to preserve. And that is what, when he died, the people from here came and collected, so that he has all of the research upon which now new students can build. You do not have to sit in front of sporting events and redo that information. You may wish to, but you do not have to. And that is the part that makes this bearable for me, is that I also, like Naylor Tom, cannot believe that I will never, never, never see him again. But he lives. He lives on in the work that he's done, in the memories that people have, in the work that they're doing. And I am enormously grateful to everyone here, to all of my wonderful friends in SIA who helped me through his obituary, and to Jet for the photographs, and to all of the people who helped remember that he was someone kind of special. And to all the friends here who knew him and worked with him and who shared with him, thank you very much, because it's all part of his vitality. And I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Yes, I'm finishing a sandwich. So if there's anyone else who will regale us with a story, I invite you to come forward. I knew it. Doctors de Blasio and Polani.
Is this a team thing? I guess I'm old, right? I've known Tom and Libby since the late 80s. Is that how long? I think so. But my story is kind of just one of those really weird things that happened to us because we all knew each other. I was still working for the Ohio Historical Society, but at this point in my life, it was in the 90s. I was working for them. They'd moved me to Columbus so I could do all kinds of interesting things and get interesting experiences. But I get a call one day from the Sloan Foundation, Alfred P. Sloan out out of the Detroit, or actually, they're not in Detroit, are they in Flint? I'm sorry, yes. They were going to do a new museum in Flint. And I got called and about putting in a bid for developing, since I had a little bit of experience developing this place. Not by myself, but I'm not that good. But at any rate, my first reaction was to call Tom and Libby saying, hey, what do you guys think, what do you think? We could put a team together. And they got right on it, I might add. Because they had some wonderful contacts. We had a design shop, I believe, in the Buffalo area that was a union shop, ready to go. And I believe their budget was at $4 million, Libby. Do you remember? Was it something like that?
It was never really clear what they were going to pay, about 2 possible.
It was we got it in under $1 million, I think. And so we had to go to Flint to do the presentation. Oh, it was a great job. Had some great ideas for what we were going to do. I think it was going to focus on the 37 sit-down strike, if I'm not mistaken. And we didn't get the job. What can I say? But what we did get were phone calls, and Libby will appreciate it because she and Tom were on the receiving end. I got a phone call one day in my little office in Columbus, and it's some young woman who was hired by the design firm that, by the way, I understand their only experiences, they did aquariums. Am I correct on that, Libby? Mystic Seaport. Yeah, that had a lot of relation with automotive history and industrial history in Flint, Michigan. Sure, I can see the relation. But at any rate, I got a call, this young I felt bad for her because I have a feeling she was, somebody fresh out of graduate school. They hired to call the other people who didn't get the job saying, can you get me up to speed on labor history? I'm not so sure I said, I don't know really what to tell this person. I said, well, let me get back to you. I called Tom and Libby. They said, wait a minute, we got that phone call. As an upshot was, we did not get her up to speed on labor history. I'm not even sure how in the hell I was supposed to do that. And by the way, it never happened. The museum never happened. And they had like a $4 or $5 million budget. I forget what it was. It was way more than what we had proposed. And this is 1995, 95. So we're talking a couple of years ago. So that, and I have a feeling Libby and I and Tom had many fond memories of that experience, our shared experience about labor history. So I have other stories, but that'll wait. Martha.
One of the first things I did when I became chair of the history department here was I hired Donna, and then that summer we hired Tom. And we were in the process of reformatting and reshaping our program in applied history, and thought that this was a team that was going to do wonders for us. We were correct. Both worked out wonderfully. Their strengths complemented each other in many ways, most of them fortuitous for us. On a more personal note, Tom is, and this is going to come as no shock to anybody, a very reticent person. He's not going to put himself out there. And I have a habit of collecting strays. And for a number of years, Tom joined us for most of the major holidays in the year. In fact, it was the year before he died that he was at our Christmas Eve party. As part of that, I have a very large extended family. Between my brother and I, we have 7 kids. They uniformly referred to him as Uncle Tom. I don't know whether he ever knew it or not, but they certainly felt about him that way. He was a normal fixture of our holidays and at least a fictive member of our family. They enjoyed joking with him. He was always engaged in the active debate about whatever sporting event was on TV at the time, had opinions. and liked to challenge others about them. And he was truly part of our family. And that's a memory that I'm going to carry for others. I talked to my daughters, all three of them, earlier today, and they wanted me to express to Libby how much they miss him and those very special events. The story I want to tell is actually both on Donna and Tom. We made a very memorable trip to the American Studies Association meeting that was being held in South Bend, Indiana at Notre Dame. And we were giving 3 presentations, all focusing on McDonald Steel and the sort of culture that grew around it. That in itself was a wonderful experience. Our road trip was something else. Tom had convinced us, and he didn't, I have to admit, he didn't take much convincing for me to go to one of the last functioning beehive brickyards in the United States. And it was in a place called Crawford, Indiana. Now, you have never been to a place like Crawford, Indiana. When we checked into our hotel the night before, we'd been in the car something like 7 hours by that point. And what we really wanted to do was sit down, have a nice drink, have several drinks, and have a nice dinner. What we discovered, however, that the only major restaurant available was a Burger King attached to a gas station. So we had our Whoppers and went back home. And we'd asked if there was somewhere we could go to get a drink, and we were informed, oh, this is a dry county. But I want to point out to you that there was a strip club adjacent to the hotel that we were staying in. It was a dry county. I still haven't figured out what's going on there. The strip club was foregone. We didn't, no. The next day we went to the brickyard. It was a wonderful experience. I got to climb in and out of, various beehive ovens. I learned more about brick than I had ever known, and maybe more than I ever really wanted. But we took wonderful pictures, and they really enhanced all of our scholarship. To satisfy Donna, who really wasn't interested in the bricks, we promised her a field trip as well. So she's, no secret, very interested in worker housing. And we were about 35, 40 minutes from Gary, Indiana. So that's where we were going to go. Now, Donna had driven. So on the way to Gary, we were regaled with very off-tune renditions of Gary, Indiana. Gary, Indiana. I can't sing at all. But we went to Gary, Indiana. Now, the funny part of this is Tom's reaction when we get there. We started driving through neighborhoods, and we were relating it to what we knew from McDonald, which was a very similar street pattern. Streets named numerically in one direction and for states in the others. And that pattern was repeated in Gary. Our problem arose when we were driving through these neighborhoods. And you have to understand, we had the very nice house, the house that was burnt, the crack house, one that looks like it was going to fall down, and it repeated, not necessarily in the same order, but for blocks, this is what we were looking at. And we'd gone around the block, and we were driving around again, and people are starting, from the front porches, are starting to look at us like, what are you doing here? Because you have an out-of-state plate, and you've circled our block twice now. What's going on? Donna says, I want to stop and get out and take pictures. Tom grabbed the camera and said, do you want to die? The photos he took gave all new meaning to drive-by shootings. And it's one of my fondest memories of Tom, and the sort of wry sense of humor that came out when you least expected it. I'm really going to miss him. I miss him already. Thank you.
No.
Anybody else? No?
I just want to say real quick, one of my favorite things during classes, if y'all know Tom, I just always try to make him laugh. And if I did make him laugh, that was like so exciting. That's all I wanted, and I just loved it. So yeah.
Well, I got something I'd like to say.
Mr. Rick Rawls.
So I've been doing steel industry preservation here in the valley for as long as I've been alive. And back in the mid 90s, we saved this rolling mill steam engine for Briar Hill Steel. And about 9 years later, we had property and started moving it over to the new site on Hubbard Road. So I met Dr. Leary at some point along the ways, and he asked if I wouldn't mind hosting his introduction to historic preservation class. That every fall semester they would take the class to various different locations in the valley, looking at different types of historic preservation in action. And so we started doing that. And the first time that he came out with the class, I don't think there was much there on site other than a concrete slab with a flywheel pit. I think it had half the flywheel in it and another casting. And then over the years, as this class would come out, there would always be a little bit more done. We'd have a little bit more of the engine put together. I think one year, it happened to be the same day that I had Grimm's Crane Service moving more parts in. So I didn't have time to actually talk to anybody. It was like, well, just stand here and watch as we put this thing together. And so it, over time, have more of that together. And then when it came out in 2009, we actually had a building over the engine. And I noticed one thing is that when the class started, when they first started coming out, there was like 25 to 30 people. The last time that he came out, there was only 6. And over time, the number of people that took that class kept dwindling, which was unfortunate to see. But the last time that he emailed me about doing it was a couple years ago. I unfortunately wasn't able to do it because I had a conflict. I wish I would have been able to do it now. But I always enjoy doing that in the fall, having something new to show of the progress we made on the preservation efforts. There was a couple other things that happened over years with Dr. Leary. One was the 2006 SIA Fall Tour that was in Youngstown that we went to. Place up in Warren, I think it was called Unistrut, something like that. And we went to McDonald Steel, and we went over to Elwood Engineered Castings. And I had worked for Elwood Engineered Castings in 1999 to 2000. So by 2006, the people that I had worked with, most of them were still there, and actually a couple of them had gone, up the ladder a little bit in the company. So when we got out there for the tour, I was able to, kind of pull a couple strings, and we got a little bit better tour than you normally would have gotten there for us. When we went to McDonald Steel, the one thing that I remember him saying was that McDonald was a living history museum masquerading as an ongoing concern. And it was absolutely true. Absolutely true. And the last thing that I remember is that there was at one point when I think it was a Northern Ohio chapter, the SIA managed to get a tour of Cleveland Track Materials. And Dr. Leary went, I went up there, of course. And Cleveland Track Materials was basically the brainchild of one man who wanted to produce railroad joint bars of various different oddball sizes that the railroad industry needed, but they were no longer being made. So he bought the former Wellman Seaver Morgan plant in Cleveland, which was the same plant that built the Cleveland Hewlett iron ore unloaders and a bunch of other steel industry equipment over the years, converted it over into this manufacturing plant. He went down to the Tredegar Iron Works and bought a rolling mill from them, brought it up to Cleveland, reassembled it, brought some of the people up with them who knew how to run it, installed a rotary hearth furnace, and took railroad car axles, cut them in half, fed them into the furnace. That was the feedstock for making the rolling mill. And they were actually rolling product that day. So we're there watching, and then, this fellow he's got this set of real tongs, real long handles on it, and they were on a chain from an overhead trolley. You take the tongs and into the furnace and pull out this 1,000-pound billet, and then guide it over and then push it into the first mill stand. And it would go through, and then someone on the other side would catch it and push it back through the other way, and back and forth on this mill until it finally came out as a joint bar shape. And it was like one of the most fascinating things I've ever seen. And he was able to, him and the rest of the people there, we stood there for an hour or so watching that, and learned quite a bit that day. And it was a really good experience to see. Unfortunately, as things normally happen, the fellow that owned that plant sold out. A couple owners later, they closed it down, scrapped the mill, scrapped everything inside. Those of you who see some pictures, you might see some pictures online of an abandoned factory in Cleveland, and there's 2 railroad cabooses on the inside. If you've ever seen those pictures, that's the same building. And when I first saw the pictures in there, I couldn't believe that this was the place that like 10 years earlier was so alive with activity and people working in there. And now it's just an abandoned building ready to get torn down. Unfortunately, another place like that has recently come to an end, which actually is McDonald Steel, that I know that Dr. Leary and myself and a lot of us just loved. That Living History Museum is now closed, and anytime now, the ownership will transfer from McDonald to a company who is going to scrap it, and more likely in a year or two, it'll be a vacant field, just like the rest of everything. So, all right, that's all I had to say.
I'd like to welcome to the podium our newest addition to the Youngstown Historical Center, Jonathan Camberas.
Thank you, Mr. John. My name is Jonathan Camberas. I don't have anything conclusive to say about Dr. Leary because I have ADHD, and our conversations, he and I, never really had conclusions. They were always ongoing. And I actually wanted to share a part of my talk that I gave for the lecture series, where it was about Greeks of Youngstown, and Dr. Leary was particularly interested in general, the way that I was tackling the community engagement. And after I thanked all of the members and the individual societies, I gave just a brief snippet because he was not able to make it. So I said, finally, I would be remiss if I did not mention Dr. Leary of blessed memory, another mentor to whom I have rambled about Greeks and Dodechanesians nearly every day while in this museum, who would not only patiently listen to my manifold voyages through rabbit holes, but he would contribute to them. He would lean so far back on his chair that you worried of him falling backwards, raise his eyebrows, and open his eyes real wide and say things like, "Have you reached the intersection in your paper yet, where pop culture and the Battle of Laros meets the guns of Navarone?" Well, to my knowledge, I cannot recall Dr. Leary ever falling off of his chair. However, the emptiness of that chair today leaves an indelible mark on this museum and its supporters as someone who cared for and treasured its mission and applications. So I appreciate all of those who have contributed to that memory, and we'll try to make it live for him. On the upside of things, on those silly comments and field trips, one of particular interest is Jacob was present, and John. And imagine my car is a tiny little Honda Fit that's out there, and in some way I had John and Dr. Leary, big and tall and short, all in the same car together. But if we had a field trip that day, he was first to sign up, and he would definitely be, in many ways, contributing through his humor, through his wit, and in general, he's just a treasure. And I had the pleasure of being his graduate research assistant for about 3 years, and Jacob alongside too. So it's been a treat, really has. I'll miss him dearly. Thanks.
Well, I think that lastly, there should be a toast to all of you who honor his memory, friends, relatives, educators, just acquaintances. It is lovely, and I'm proud to see you all here. Indulge me again.
Oh, by the way, there's lots of food. Okay.
I wanted to
There's still
say,
plenty of booze.
in memory and in honor of Dr. Thomas Leary, we ought to go out and talk to all our friends and family and associates and say, come to this museum. Because really, it's not that visited by local people. Only because I think they still know and heard it, and it's kind of past. But it's amazing what's down here. Like, I had worked in a bluing mill one summer while going to YSU, and to watch that video and that is amazing. Because I remember it was like 4th of July every time they were rolling an ingot. Because there would be pockets of scale of that. And once they hit the rolls, they would explode. I mean, there would just be little missiles come off. And, I have to go in there. I was a millwright helper at the time. And I have to go in and change the side guides that fell out. And it was tremendously hot. And you wore all your cotton clothes and jackets and then underwear too. To do that was just amazing. And, people now just don't understand that. But bring here, just like the changing rooms, with baskets that were up in the ceiling, they have your clothes in that, your work clothes in that, and then when you changed, you put your money in there, all that, and you had a lock, and you were safe. Just to do that stuff, it was amazing. And I got the great privilege of working for 3 summers during my years at YSU studying to be an electrical engineer. But I always got to be a electrician's helper in a coke plant, so I learned about the coke plant and the dirtiness of it, but producing the coke that was needed. And then I worked in a polluting mill, like I said. There was always the display of the fireworks. And then worked for the Powerhouse Repair Gang, which we did. That was the most advanced group of electrical type maintenance people. Real geniuses were actually in that department to service and really improve the performance of the bills in the house. So just bring your people, your relatives, your grandchildren, great-grandchildren to here and show them what it was like. And you maybe they'll get a little interest in it and they'll understand it, not just from hearing about the steel mills that are gone and that, but they're really how their grandparents or parents worked in that mill and really strive to make a good product, especially the sheet too. My father was a floor foreman on a blast furnace, and to this day, it was like, he told me, it was like being a ship's captain. You actually ran the milk, everything came through you. Nobody, even the superintendent couldn't tell him to come down and how to operate that blast furnace. For that 8 hours, he was the ship's captain. And then he became, later on, right before, 1977, he became the shift supervisor. So he had all 4 blast furnaces under his supervision. And he loved it. And he inspired me to be that kind of person when I was an electrical engineer in heavy industry, Alcoa and AK Steel and other people. I worked at it like that, like I'm in charge. And I would have some influence over the way the company worked. So that's my story. And Dr. Tom was someone I talked to a lot. I took a lot of the meetings and that. Because my dad, he was that type of historical person too, that he would cut out articles in the Vindicator and send it to me no matter where I worked, around the country, around the world. He would send me the articles. So the still tradition in my heart is there. Thank you.